In the fourth part of music theory, I'm going to talk about the bass clef. So far, we've been dealing with notes here on the piano, sort of C, C. As you can see on the screen, I've just played those four notes in the order that they appear. Now, bass clef has a different symbol at the beginning. Instead of the sort of arty sort of calligraphy sort of squiggle, we've got instead a sort of a backwards C with two little dots on it. And you can see that on the stave, on the just above, you can see that symbol. Now, this means all the notes down this half of the piano, or all the low notes. So this includes bass guitar or trombone or other things that occupy a low pitch range, cello, for example. Now, unfortunately, the notes on the bass clef are in a different position to those on the treble clef. We had the treble clef spaces, which were F, A, C, E. In the bass clef, the spaces are actually different notes. They are A, C, E, and G. So they are down this half of the piano. Middle C, which is this one, if you look on the stave above, you can see middle C as a treble clef note, and then the equivalent bass clef note. So you can see that it's a note that hangs below the stave on treble clef, and a note that sits at the top of the stave in bass clef. And then you can work out what all the other notes do. So on bass clef, for example, if we go from middle C, if we go down, you can see that the notes go from the note that has a line through it at the top to a note that has a line through at the bottom. And then all of the other notes are exactly the same, and things like the sharps and flats are written in exactly the same way as treble clef. Now, on piano music, you would have two lines. You'd have the treble clef line and the bass clef line, and you would read these, as at the same time. So, for example, I had Twinkle Twinkle Little Star in the treble clef only before. I had this. Now, if I played that in what's called unison, so I played the same thing in both hands, you can see above on the stave there are now two lines which join together at the beginning with a sort of bracket, which shows that it is a piano score. And you can have different things. Not the best harmonic rendition of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but if you follow the music there, you can see that there were different things happening in the right hand to the left hand. Now, of course, all this is only relevant if you are playing the piano, or to a certain extent other instruments like the harp, where you can have bass and treble clef together. Really, they're the main things. Or if you're an orchestral conductor, you have to be able to read lots and lots of parts at once, or a church organist or whatever. But if you are an instrumentalist like a flautist, or if you're a guitarist, or if you're a bass guitar or oboe or anything, violin, you'll be reading one note at once. But on things like string instruments, you can have notes that happen at the same time. And you saw that in part 3, where you could have two notes that occur concurrently. Like that. Now, all of the notes on the piano, as you can see, are in a repeating pattern. And it's important that whenever you're sat there with your keyboard, that you try notes out and you try and find the next one up. Now, the piano, I know this might sound a bit odd, but it was designed by a human being in order that another human being could play it. Now, with the case with any musical instrument, the best thing to do is to be able to play it without having to look at it, without having to look at where all the notes are. So for an adult hand, a comfortable span is 1 octave. Now this means that you can start getting used to the distances between some of these notes. So you can find your G, for example, or you can find your F, the A, the E, and then the ones that are right next to them, the D or the B. You might have to come in for the black note. So the idea is to be able to, if you know where your thumb or your last finger is, that you can find any other note on the piano by judging distance. And you need to, for pianists this is, you need to be able to do that in order that you can read the music, because you've got bass clef and treble clef together. It becomes really tricky if you're sort of looking through and think, oh, there are all these notes everywhere. But sometimes all you need to do with music, and this really applies to any instrument, is to look at the distance between two notes instead of looking at each note as an absolute thing. So for example, on the stave above you can see a C to a G. Now if you look on the stave, both of those notes are on lines. You've got C, which has the line going through it, and then G, which also has one of the lines of the stave going through it. Now if I was to move up one note to D and A, both of those notes there are on spaces, etc., etc. So you can start to judge that distance on the music. Octaves, it's the other way. You have a line and a space, or space, line, as you can see on the music. So that essentially gives you the sort of, it allows you to judge the distance a bit. So, and of course, all of this has to work in conjunction with your key signatures. Now, any questions on music theory? I've made this as the 4th part of this series. Any questions, please do put them in the box below, and I will answer them to the best, answer them as quickly as I can, either by a comment underneath or maybe another video. So there it is. There's a bit of music theory for beginners.